Welcome, everybody, to Blissfully Aware, the show in which me and my friends discuss what's going on in fandom and nerd news in general. So I want to start off this episode by explaining that there's going to be a couple changes coming to the show. The biggest one being that Kelty and Kendra, my lovely previous co-hosts, will no longer be with us due to some semi-permanent technical difficulties. We are going to try and have them come on as guest-spurts from time to time, but until then, I'd like to introduce previous guest-spurt and new co-host, JD! Welcome, JD!
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, no problem. I will do my best. I know I don't really have the voice for radio, but we'll do our level best.
Yeah. I'm excited to have you on, and I'm excited to continue this show. It's been a fun project for me, and people seem to enjoy it, so there you go.
I think it will be very fun, if not a little infuriating at times.
Oh gosh, yeah. That's the blissfully aware motto.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to get into it? What are we discussing this week?
What we are discussing this week is the debacle that is the FurAffinity terms of service changes, their escalation of certain rules that they have had in place for a while but had not fully clarified, and still technically have not fully clarified because there is no clarification in any of their updates. It's going to be interesting.
I have not kept up with this one. I've seen everybody talking about it, but I don't actually even know what FurAffinity is, to be honest.
So FurAffinity is a kind of like an aggregate site. It's sort of where all of the furries come together, whether it's under a not safe for work or safe for work context. A lot of them do business through, like, not through FurAffinity, but out of FurAffinity. So it's how you find people who can make fursuits. It's how you find people who can make art of your fursonas. Like it's essentially like it's an image sharing website. It's kind of like where they all congregate. It's where the furry fandom happens.
Aw, I'm glad they have a little home.
Yeah, well, some of them no longer have a little home.
Oh
Because
no.
unfortunately, FurAffinity has an interesting take on one of their previous rules that they had originally made several years ago. I don't remember which year it was, but there was an update to one of their internal policies, probably just like it was like a week ago, I think. And it was meant to close a loophole that allowed for characters with childlike appearances to be depicted on the site. So, like the trope of the 4,000-year-old lowly vampire.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very confusing because they don't even know what they're talking about. And in fact, that was kind of shown in their Discord server when their minor protective services moderator.
That's a title.
That is a title, and it is a volunteer position. They are not paid for this position. This is totally volunteer. Was apparently unclear as to the details of the ruling, because literally this rule is so vague. This is unbelievably vague. So characters must be aged up, but they're not talking about level or evolution, like in terms of like Pokemon or like Digimon.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about like proportions. So if a character has childlike proportions, you must alter that character's appearance so that they appear to be an adult. And this has led to hilarious outcomes because FurAffinity has essentially banned corgis.
Oh. Oh
Yeah.
no. Corgi
Yeah.
furries.
Yeah, all the corgi furries, unfortunately, are essentially banned. Now, FurAffinity may say, no, 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 we're not banning corgi furries. You know, it's not about that. It very clearly is. But it's also subjective. So if you have one moderator who interprets the rules one way, and another moderator who interprets the rules another way, you're going to end up with inconsistencies in banning and moderation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And they've also said that like there's no species ban or anything like that, but there very clearly is because they specifically mention certain Pokemon like Igglybuff or Cubone or Eevee because they consider them baby Pokemon. Even though an Eevee, like, I mean, if anybody knows anything about Pokemon, an Eevee could be a bajillion years old, you know, without ever having evolved.
Right.
So, and Eevee doesn't necessarily look baby. Like it's a freaking fox or
Yeah, I
whatever it
mean
is.
it's
Yeah.
cute, but I wouldn't say it's baby.
Yeah, it's definitely cute, but you know, I can't say it's a baby. It's a it's a Pokemon. So they've been having a lot of problems with understanding like the need for consistency and moderation. And they've actually used the term subjective in their own like official statements. They've used the term subjective, which is pretty much a death sentence for like freedom of expression.
Yeah, that's no bueno.
Yeah. So that's kind of like where we're at in terms of like FurAffinity's like statements on the issue, but there have been some really hilarious updates to their statements. Like for example, one of their statements was that you cannot have any character who is a child depicted as pregnant, but they had originally had an age. And since you haven't kept up on this, what do you think their age cutoff was for like you cannot have a character younger than this age depicted as pregnant? Like try to guess the age.
Before the new rules?
Before the update, before the newest update.
14?
14? It was 13.
Oh, I'm not off. Okay.
Okay, so you're not too far off. So you could not have a minor who was under the age of 13 as pregnant.
So I could still have pregnant Sonic.
Yes, but when people were like that's absolutely ridiculous, like what like this rule seems strangely specific, like maybe there's a moderator or a director of the site who like had a teen pregnancy kink.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of realizing that their rules were unduly vague or strangely written, they just decided, based on feedback, we're going to change that rule so that nobody depicted under the age of 18 can be pregnant.
No, my pregnant
Yeah.
Sonic.
Right. So now if you have a pregnant Sonic, you better make his limbs like longer so that he looks older
Oh, I
according to the subjective rules of a moderator on FurAffinity.
don't like picturing that.
I know it's they actually did have a couple years ago they had an artist moderator make like adult looking Sonic art to like make an example. So I got to be honest, it was pretty cursed. It wasn't as cursed as official movie Sonic, but it was pretty cursed anyway.
Ugh, poor
Yeah.
Sonic.
So They also tried to use Judy from Zootopia to kind of be like, here's Judy next to her siblings, like you can very clearly see her proportions, blah blah blah. But when you take Judy and you put her next to other references that the moderators used for proportions, she's very clearly not in compliance with that. So essentially you would have, if you were doing like stylization, if you had like a specific type of stylization in your art style, you would have these not safe for work you would have not safe for work artists making just random like character profiles of children in order to prove that their characters were drawn as adults, which I don't know, that seems pretty sus to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? Like
Choices.
that's how you would, because they were like, "Oh, we'll consider everyone's proportions in canon to their universe," right? But what if
Mhm.
your persona doesn't like come from any specific universe other than something that came out in your head? You would have to put them in context by drawing them next to a child.
Oh, I don't like that.
I
Makes me
don't like
feel
that either. Like
icky.
you would have like a whole bunch of essentially pornography, and then you would have a character profile where you're featuring a child on your clearly pornographic, you know, FurAffinity account, which just seems very incongruent and sus.
Hmm.
And it would all be just so that you were trying to avoid being like perma banned from, this site.
Okay. I mean, I guess, like, theoretically, I get what they were trying to do, but that's not how it's gonna work in, like,
Hmm.
a practical setting. Because, like you said, you're gonna have a not safe for work piece of art, and then next to it is this child.
Yeah, and you're gonna have abuse of this policy. You're gonna have a crazy amount of abuse from this policy.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
could see that happening easily.
yeah. I'm really interested in how it works out for them, whether or not this is going to be like that threshold where people lose faith in the platform.
Yeah. From the little bit I did see on Twitter, it was not positive. People seemed to feel like they were being kicked out of their own house, kind of. But I could sympathize. Like,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, these rules are instituted and you can't do what you were doing before, despite the fact that it's fucking fiction. Um,
Yeah.
let's be clear here.
Yes, yes, it is. It is fiction. It's completely and utterly fictional. These are not real characters. These are not real people. In fact, they're animals. So see, that's the part that gets me. Like as a non-furry, you're totally fine with rendering animal genitalia and making dogs smooch each other, like just these fictional dogs smooching each other, and but you're not cool with it if they look like puppies.
I don't know. Furries kind of confuse me in general, and I get that, like, no furry is gonna be held to one specific standard, but, like, you get the furry aunties who come in and they're like, Loli is wrong, but dog dick is fine.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, that it confuses me a lot. It's interesting because you apparently don't have to have a FurAffinity account to get into the FurAffinity Discord server. So naturally, what do you think I did?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Proud of you.
of course I did. I am a muckraker. So so I went into the FurAffinity Discord server to rake some muck,
Hmm.
and they had like a 3-minute cooldown for their discussion board for their update. And so I wrote some pretty pointed, hey, when can users of this site expect like guidelines that will be provided to your moderators for moderation purposes. Like, when can we expect the transparency in the rubric for grading, quote unquote, uh, artworks or pieces of art or creations? Like, when are users going to be able to expect a definitive guide on what is going to be acceptable on your site?
Mm-hmm.
And I was pointedly ignored
Of course.
by every moderator, especially the minor protective services moderator, because they were like, oh yeah, we were going to write up a guide, but it's not written yet. Well, what do you mean it's not written yet? You don't have your guide set up before you announced your rules?
That was a choice.
Yeah, and I was like, "So how are you going to mitigate, censorship? Like, how are you gonna mitigate, like, the abuse of censorship, for your site? How are you going to, are you guys planning on recruiting more volunteers to handle the influx of tickets? Are you, like, and I'm trying to, I'm trying to get answers to, like, practical questions,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely no answers to practical questions, none whatsoever. Very, very pointedly ignored. And there were other people in the board that was like, when are you going to answer these questions? And they would not even address that they had even been asked. Very, very interesting board. Unfortunately, I was on my lunch break at work, so I only had an hour to poke at the bear. But of course, also I was instigating to the point where they had said that they were going to have they were going to turn that board into a forum for feedback, by making a 6-hour cooldown time.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, so this is an effort to isolate users, so that they cannot bounce ideas off of each other and extrapolate from each other's ideas, and kind of like go in depth on any particular idea.
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, as I am, I was like, okay, everybody who's in here right now, you should consider making a separate space, like a Telegram or, a different Discord server or something where you cannot be seen by the moderators, so that they don't know what you're talking about. They don't know what you're saying, so that you can provide a united front. And somebody was like, "Are you trying to unionize the furries?"
Champion of the furries.
Maybe the furries need a union.
Are you gonna sign up to be union leader?
No, see, the problem is I don't care enough about the furries to actually put in the work. I was hoping to find like a union leader furry and like inspire them to become, a leader for them. There was a furry that I thought had promise, and in fact I did approach them and I was like, hey, have you thought about unionizing the furries, essentially? But turns out they were an anti.
Oh
Well, and that's not necessarily a deal breaker for unionizing the furries. You know what I mean? Because maybe they're going to have a come to Jesus moment, like. And also there's a difference between allowing full on, uncensored swastikas on FurAffinity and making subjective rules about, like, what is permitted on your site. You know what I mean? Because you can, as much as I am a proponent of full anti-censorship, you can 100% have a rule of, we're banning swastikas and Confederate flags. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
yeah.
Like that's not vague. That's not a vague rule. That's not subjective. Like if you see a swastika, you can ban it. Like, you can even have bots that can identify a swastika. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not hard to. You don't need a volunteer to look at this thing and go, "Oh, are their limbs short in canon?" Like, a bot can't do that. So that's not necessarily a deal breaker. I tried to convince them. I don't know if they're I don't know if they're gonna go and they're gonna do it, but hopefully someone takes up the mantle and starts getting serious about it. I don't have a lot of skin in the game, but I really hate to see cultural staples like FurAffinity and like DeviantArt lose like cultural content and like artifacts. I hate using the word artifacts for furry porn, but also like, that exists in a context of historical cultural importance.
For sure.
Yeah. As much as I'm rolling my eyes right now, yes.
Absolutely. There
Yeah.
is value to it in its own right.
Yes.
As much as we might think it's hilarious.
Yeah, yeah, like I'm like, museum of furry art of artistic furry pornography, like so valuable. Let me just curate this, and have archives of furry pornography. And here we can see the veritable Mona Lisa of furry pornography.
Neon green corgi
Yeah,
set
yeah.
against a wild field of flowers.
Right, yeah, yeah, like, and in this lovingly rendered vision of dog cunnilingus, we can see the message of the artist and their dedication to their craft. Yeah.
Oh.
So, I really do appreciate furry pornography as a cultural kind of having a cultural impact and as a cultural staple over a time. And I really do hate the idea of FurAffinity just purging whole entire um like image boards of corgi furries just because they had short legs. Like that just seems so disingenuous to me.
No, and that's a shame. That I would put up there with like the live journal cleansing
Ah, yes,
when
the warriors of innocence.
yeah, when you go and just remove all this. I mean, the internet never forgets, but
Mhm.
you can erase large chunks of history, and I'm using the word history lightly, of
Mhm.
course. um but it's a shame when you see it happen because somebody put the effort in and now it's for naught.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just gone now. And there's no discernible reason for, corgi furries to be gone. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like it's hard because, every time they come out with a clarification of their rules, nothing is actually clarified. They believe that it's clarified, but nothing has actually be clarified. And all they say to a lot of stuff is like, if you're confused about whether or not your art is in violation, send us a support ticket. But then they will also say that they only have so many volunteers. And support tickets are going unanswered after days and days and days because I'm sure they're getting a deluge of tens of thousands of support tickets from people who are concerned that their business is going to be affected by this.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's an adventure. Has there been any update that you know about that they've like finally consolidated any rules together that actually make sense?
No, their latest update was for the pregnant minors and not allowing pregnant minors at all. That was May 24th, and it is currently the 29th. So we have gone 5 days without any updated uh clarifications. I don't think they have any actual clarifications. They're I'm assuming that none of their um none of their moderators have come out and been able to speak in any actual official capacity, because like
Mm-hmm.
their moderators say anything, and they'll say things that are directly contradictory to their actual like official news journal updates on the site. So nobody actually knows what's going on, not the users, not the moderators, nothing. So if what the moderators are saying is true, there's a whole lot of stuff that could just be randomly deleted off the site. If what the site is saying that is true, there could be a whole lot of other stuff randomly deleted off the site. I mean, it's kind of a it's kind of a dumpster fire, to be frank.
Yeah. It almost reminds me of Art Fight.
Yeah, Art Fight, they decided that they were gonna have some weirdo rules and nobody knew what was happening.
Exactly. And then they went and
Yeah.
just like randomly purged all this art that didn't necessarily fit the standard of their new rules. And
Mhm.
I, if I'm a gambling man, I'd say that that's what's about to happen.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. Like we're already having, people who are like, "Wait, but what if my fursona isn't humanoid?" You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like, and they specifically say for humanoid characters, this is, that these are the standards. But what if they don't make any, they don't make any statements on like if your fursona, which I don't know if you can have a fursona who's a worm, who's an earthworm, but if you did, like, say you had a sea cucumber
Hmm.
or like an earthworm or something, and you don't have a head, so you can't measure by heads. You don't have arms and legs, so you can't measure by proportion. Like what's your metric if somebody has a sea cucumber as as a fursona? Or like I mentioned in my Substack article, Pyukamuku, who, let's rule 34 Pyukamuku, the Pokemon. It's a sea cucumber. Like what's the metric for a very loving and adoring Pyukamuku being used as a fleshlight? Is it a child?
Is it? We'll never
Is it a
know.
child? Yeah, like it has a face, like, but it doesn't have a head. It doesn't have arms. Like, is that ban worthy? You know what I mean? Is two earthworms having sex ban worthy? Is two pukamukus touching innards? Because you know how they like puke out their insides
Hmm.
to like hit people or whatever. They can make like a hand out of their insides because they're at sea cucumber.
Hmm.
Um, like if they puke out their insides and they touch them together, is that sex?
Ooh, it's certainly naughty.
Right? Like, ooh, I'm gonna puke out my guts and make them touch your guts. Like, like is that ban worthy? Like, do they have to be blushing for it to be suggestive? Like it's interesting because I feel like the people who go to create these rules, they really don't have that much imagination.
Well, I guess I have some bad news for Heidi Klum's earthworm persona.
Does Heidi Klum have an earthworm persona?
You don't remember that? Like several
No.
years ago for some Halloween costume, because she goes hard for her Halloween costumes. She dressed up as an earthworm and like laid down on the red carpet to this party, and like everybody took pictures of her just laying on the ground as an earthworm. You have to look up, Google
Okay.
Heidi
Okay, I'm
Klum
I'm
earthworm.
googling it literally right now. Heidi Klum earth Oh, it comes up as a suggestion. Heidi Klum dresses as an earthworm. Let me No!
I'm telling you.
Oh no. She looks like a piece of bacon. Oh no. This is
Yeah.
terrifying. Oh my gosh. That is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's
Yeah, no.
it's
You know what?
something.
She's canceled. She can't be on for Affinity. Like, I mean, that's way too sexy,
It's such a shame
obviously.
for her. I'm sure she's
Yeah,
devastated.
absolutely devastated. You know, she's probably like letters to the editor, babe. Oh my gosh, that is terrifying. I love it. I love everything about it. But like, but this is what this is what I'm saying. Like, art has no bounds. There's Heidi Klum out there dressed as a freaking earthworm. Who would have guessed that somebody was going to dress up as an earthworm? Like,
Not
could you
I.
imagine trying to make like a dress code for somewhere that's like filled with artists, and saying, "Oh, yeah, you're a bunch of artists, but here's your dress code." And it's like you're trying to make a dress code that would like allow for, freedom of expression, but you forgot to say don't dress as an earthworm. Like,
Well, technically,
like
you didn't
it's
say.
right. Like you were trying to make it possible to have all these different types of stylizations, but you forgot, you were vague enough that you forgot that Heidi Klum was going to show up in a freaking earthworm costume.
Speaking of fursuits, um, Jared Leto on the red carpet of the Met
I saw
Gala,
that.
dressed as
Yeah, I saw that.
that designer's cat. I saw this tweet of somebody being like, "This is our 9/11," and someone responded, "People died," and the original poster was like, "I barked at the screen."
Oh no.
And that's all I can think about now anytime I'm like, something's really terrible. I barked at the screen.
I barked at the screen. Like, okay, but like, this is our 9/11.
This is our 9/11. People died.
Jared Leto. Jared Leto is probably someone's 9/11. Like, oh, so not super off topic, not super off topic. Still in the realm of um in the realm of people's inability to be creative, but also talking about 9/11.
Mm.
Um somebody had an "our flag means death" 9/11 AU.
Oh my god.
Yes,
Really?
yeah, yeah, that is a thing that exists. And I feel like that's sort of like on the same level of like people uh who want to ban certain things just do not have the creativity to come up with all of the shit that people would come up with.
Yeah, I certainly would not have put together those two things.
you know um there's just some stuff that they mash them together, and it's part of like taking something that is part of your personality and mashing it with something that you have complicated feelings over. And furries who do like cub art and stuff like that, that's part of their creativity, that's part of their process, that's part of their art. So when you have these people who really identify with Evie as someone who could be anything, who has so much potential, but chooses to remain true to themselves and what they truly feel on their path, as they are, as not water, fire, electric, dark, psychic, like they choose not to take any of those paths, but to stay on their middle path, like their steady path. If they really identify with Evie and they want to stay Evie for their whole life, and they want to make Evie art, having that taken away from them because they're because Evie is minor coded must be really devastating.
Oh, absolutely.
If you have complicated emotions about things that might have happened to you as a child, or if you have complicated emotions about something like 9/11, or if you need to draw a comic where you are personified as an Evie and you are witnessing 9/11, you know that's something that is part of your personality. That's part of your soul. That's
Mm-hmm.
something that, somebody else might actually identify with that as well. But, you know, if somebody out there is like, "Oh no, you can't depict Evie experiencing 9/11 or experiencing their personal 9/11," and they're like, "This is my experience as Evie, you know, being molested as a child or something." Like
Mm-hmm.
that's part of their art, and somebody else might identify with that. Like, oh, say you're a Vaporeon now, but you chose to be a Vaporeon because of something that happened to you, when you were Eevee. And that Eevee doesn't necessarily have to be a child. Like it could be something that happened to you in college, and it was just before you touched that stone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if somebody is interpreting that to be you as a child, that's on them, because they're interpreting that under their lens of their own personal bias. So that's where subjectivity comes in as such a problem, because if you're automatically thinking that what happened to Evie is something that happened to them as a child, that is your own personal bias. That you could be Evie, I could be Evie right now, and in my 50s be a Vaporeon because of something that happened to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
I might be like totally just, this might be so windy in terms of thought processes and how I got here. I don't know. It'll make sense for the ADHD people.
No, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I
Okay.
get it. I
You
get
know,
it.
like if you're looking at quote unquote baby Pokemon, so like Cubones or EVs or something like that, and you're putting on those Pokemon that they are children. That is your bias as someone who is looking at that piece of artwork. That's not something that the artist is trying to convey, unless they're literally putting goo goo gaga, I'm a baby in their work.
Whereas it's totally fine for an adult diaper fur to be depicted because they're an adult.
Right. Like you can have it, as long as their proportions are correct. If they're a
Mm-hmm.
corgi diaper, you're getting nuked.
Oh, I'm barking
It's
at the
sad.
screen.
It's, I don't know, barking at the screen, man, my dude. Like
um, well, I don't know, JD. Do you think we talked about the thing?
we talked about the thing.
Do you have a happy you want to share with us?
Oh man, a happy. Let's see. Geez, a happy. Well, it finally got warm up here in the northern wastes. So I have been going on walks and going on hikes. I got to see some orioles, because on my hiking trail there is a couple of trees that flower in about mid-May, early to mid-May, and the orioles are all about them. So some Baltimore orioles were in the area, and they were very raucous, and I got to see quite a few of them, which is sort of kind of rare around these parts, unless like somebody has an oriole feeder and has it where everybody can see it.
Aw, look at you touching grass.
I know. I actually touch grass a lot. Mostly because me and my boss are pretty avid bird watchers, so we go out and try to find the indigo buntings and the rose-breasted grosbeaks and the orioles.
I love that for you.
Isn't that such an old people thing to do?
No, I always keep an eye out for roadrunners around here just because they'll show up. I live semi in the country. They'll show up in neighborhoods and stuff like that. And I have a lot of lizards in my front yard, so sometimes I'll like peek out the window and there's a giant ass roadrunner just hanging out in my yard chomping on a lizard.
Oh, that's so fun. That's so cute. Like as much as like I would love to have lizards in the lawn, we don't get lizards. We get toads though. And you know what we get? We get great blue herons.
Ooh.
And the babies sometimes will hang out in my lawn. There has to be something in the lawn that they really like to eat, because the babies sometimes will show up.
I love that.
Do you have a happy?
I do have a happy. My happy's probably the same as a lot of people's happies. I bought Tears of the Kingdom. So I've been playing Zelda when I'm not work, and then Zelda, then work. But I got to hang out with my sister yesterday, and she showed me a bunch of cool secrets that I didn't know because she's much better at video games than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So got to spend the day just bebopping around with my sister playing Tears of the Kingdom. It was nice.
That's so wholesome. I love that.
Yeah, it was a nice little break from reality. Didn't get online or anything at all, and just enjoyed myself. I need days like that.
That that is amazing. I love that. I love that rest from being online. In fact, I've kind of been doing that a little bit more recently. I've kind of been trying to keep my ear to the ground for big incidents. It's nice to have the Fanables for that because they have a tendency to pick up on the really egregious stuff.
Mhm.
And then of course I rake a bunch of muck and then I leave. But and then and then of course I'm just playing phone games for the next 50 years.
Eh, as long as you're entertained.
Right. I come back, my DMs are filled with people who are like, help us, furries," and I'm like, No, no."
Well then that'll do it for us this week. Thank you again, JD, for joining as the new co-host. I really appreciate you stepping up to the plate.
No problem.
If you'd like to find us online, you can find us on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and now YouTube at Blissfullyshow. We finally got a handle on YouTube. I'm very proud of that.
Round of applause.
Yeah. And then, yeah, until next time, y'all. Bye. Yeah, and it was also all set up by George W. Bush.
George W. Bush personally called up Jared Leto.